Star is not here to argue for or against any person and potential client. I mean, can you give us an idea what are the petitions now being filed against the leading candidate so far, which is Bongbong Marcos Jr.? What is the argument of both sides? What should we watch out for? For political junkies, parang ano yung mga dates, ano yung mga potential decisions ang dapat namin titignan, ano yung mga legal coordinates ng dapat malaman ng tao in order to, I would say, have a following of this issue in an informed way. No, hindi lang yung marites, yung alam namin which is which.
As far as I know, there are currently 2 petitions pending regarding the candidacy of ex-Senator Bongbong Marcos. And the first, like I mentioned, was a petition for disqualification. And the second was a petition for cancellation of the COC. So yung ground or yung factual grounds na ginamit sa parehong petition, I believe are the same. It's the non-filing of income tax returns of ITRs for certain years. Yes. Well, dalawa actually, dahil yung crime for which he was supposedly convicted carried a penalty of imprisonment of more than 18 months. Kaya nga lang, ang nangyari, although na-convict siya sa trial court at na-affirm yung conviction sa Court of Appeals, yung Court of Appeals tinanggal yung penalty of imprisonment. Marami, of course.
I mean, is there any explanation why they did that? Like, yeah, guilty ka pa rin, pero hindi ka namin i-punish masyado. You just pay something.
Well, maraming mga legal luminaries nagsasabi na hindi dapat ginawa yan ng Court of Appeals. Siyempre, ang mga abogado ni Mr. Marcos are saying that, of course, the Court of Appeals can do that. It is within the discretion of the Court of Appeals. But that is what happened. Ang nangyari kasi, naging final yung judgment na yon dahil hindi na ito na-question ng either party. So, whether right or wrong, it has become final. And so as things stand, walang penalty of imprisonment yung crime that he was convicted of.
Right.
So the other possible ground for disqualification, kung wala na yung imprisonment of more than 18 months, is having been convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude. So like we said,
attorney sa ating mga moral
yung
followers.
Moral turpitude.
Decente namin na followers. Ano to moral?
Actually, the term moral turpitude has escaped a clear definition. It's a concept that we imported from the US. Right. So wala kang makikitang definition ng moral turpitude in any law that uses the phrase. So ordinarily, di ba, the law would define the phrases used in its language, but itong moral turpitude wala siyang set legal definition. So what we do is we look at jurisprudence, so yung mga previous cases na decide ng mga courts. So like we said, it is a concept that was imported from the United States. It was first used, I believe, in the Immigration Act of 1915. At sinasabi dun sa Immigration Act na yung mga immigrants who have been convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude can be deported. And so in 1951, a case was brought before the US Supreme Court, the case of Jordan versus George, involving an Italian immigrant na pinapa-deport ng gobyerno.
Bakit?
And guess what the crime was? Supposedly of that Italian immigrant, he was convicted of tax evasion.
Oh.
So sabi ng
Italian connection. Yeah.
Yes, oo. And so sabi ng immigration ay pwede siyang ma-deport under the Immigration Act because tax evasion or conspiracy to defraud the US government of taxes is a crime involving moral turpitude. And the US Supreme Court in that case agreed that indeed the crime of tax evasion includes the element of fraud, and therefore it involves moral turpitude. So that was a Supreme Court decision in the United States. So hindi naman tayo necessarily bound ng decisions, of course, ng Korte Suprema ng United States. unless our own Supreme Court will adopt the same definition. And as far as the Philippine Supreme Court is concerned, there have been several cases dealing with moral turpitude. Isa sa mga pinakasikat na kaso is actually an old case, yung pinakaunang kaso in Rebasa. It's a 1920 case. Actually, it involves the disbarment of a lawyer. And one of the grounds kasi for the disbarment of a lawyer at that time is conviction of a crime involving moral turpitude. And that particular lawyer was convicted of the crime of abduction with consent. And so he was being disbarred on that ground. So the question was, is abduction with consent a crime involving moral turpitude? At dahil wala ngang definition sa batas, ang ginamit ng Supreme Court natin ay yung definition sa isang legal dictionary, yung Bovier's Law Dictionary. At sinasabi doon sa Law Dictionary na yon, ang moral turpitude is any act that is contrary to justice, honesty, modesty, and good morals. And using that,
wala na yata
napaka-vague. So sabi ng Korte Suprema,
pero they keep on using that word, no?
Sorry, Mark. Na-scandal ako, abduction with consent, nagtanan sila.
Something like that. Oo. Apparently minor siguro ito. Apparently minor siguro ito. Tapos abduction with consent yung kaso. And the Supreme Court said that abduction with consent is a crime involving moral turpitude. So titignan din natin yung mga subsequent cases, and I think there were 2 cases. Actually, nagkaroon ng enumeration, and I would like to read the enumeration in one of the cases that was decided by the Supreme Court.
Ayan, basa.
In the case of IRRR versus NLRC 1993, ang haba nito. So nag-enumerate lang yung court kasi hindi siya makapagbigay ng definition. Sabi ng Supreme Court, ito yung mga example ng crimes na involving moral turpitude. So abduction with consent, bigamy, concubinage, smuggling, rape, estafa, attempted bribery, profiteering, robbery, murder, theft, illicit sexual relations, violation of bouncing checks, falsification, intriguing against honor, violation of anti-fencing, perjury, forgery, direct bribery, at frustrated homicide. So mahaba.
Marami pala kaming pwede disqualify.
Actually, madami.
Kaming pwede ma-disqualify.
Ito, another interesting enumeration, yung kaso naman ng Zari versus Flores. Ang kaso na involved naman dito is libel. So the Supreme Court again said na maaring makonsider na crime involving moral turpitude yung libel. At again, the Supreme Court in that case made an enumeration. At this time kasama na sa enumeration yung tax evasion or evasion of income tax. So in yet another case, itong Paras versus Vailoses, sinabi na lang ng Supreme Court. So yung mga enumeration naman na to, hindi siya exhaustive, meaning hindi lamang ito yung mga crimes involving moral turpitude. So sinabi na lang ng Supreme Court doon sa Paras versus Vailoses na basta kasama sa mga element yung fraud, sa mga elements ng crime yung fraud or panloloko, it will be considered moral turpitude. So yun ang magiging, I think that is what these disqualification or cancellation cases will turn on. It's whether the crime of not filing income tax returns for certain years will constitute moral turpitude.
Balik ko lang, saan case yung merong kasamang tax evasion? Anong example na case yun? Tandaan mo to, Richard, kasi baka ito yung ito yung posibleng
Zari versus Flores, Mark. It's a 1979 case. Zari. Philippine case.
Hindi Italian to. Okay.
Hindi.
Wait lang, attorney. I just have sorry, okay, just devil's advocate. Kung ako ay parang from Mars, no? Punta din parang, wait lang. Etong tao na pinapa-disqualify, nag-congressman, nag-senador, tumakbong vice-presidente, na Supreme Court pa yung talo niya, no one raised this issue. Then suddenly now that he's running for president, gusto siya people are questioning whether he has the qualification to run for the higher office. I mean, isn't that a little bit hypocritical or opportunistic or inconsistent? I mean, hinayaan na siya tumakbo for all those positions. He was a senator of the Republic, no? In this case, in the case of Bongbong Marcos Jr., isn't this unfair? Or I would even say that in the case in 2016, Grace Poe was a senator. she was allowed to run for all those positions, and it was only when she ran for the presidency na biglang parang ano yun siya. So yun lang, I'm just trying to play the devil's advocate here. Could you tell us from a legal standpoint, how does that make sense?
Definitely, I can imagine that the lawyer for Mr. Marcos will raise that, that this appears to be an afterthought, and it is only being raised now because I'm running for, he's running for the highest office in the land. Meron tayong konsepto na tinatawag na estopel. So, stop na yung mga tao from questioning his qualification dahil nakailang position na nga naman siya, nakailang national position na siya, and still at this time nobody questioned. So I would like to add lang, Richard and Mark, na it's also interesting in these cases decided by the Supreme Court na yung isang crime like homicide or frustrated homicide, it can be considered as a crime involving moral turpitude or not, depending on the facts. So
wait, so homicide pero hindi ka turpitude. Parang ay labo na pare. So ano ka, pwede kang mamatay tao.
Ano yung homicide na doesn't hit on the moral turpitude?
Yes, so meron kasing isang kaso na sinabi ng Supreme Court na hindi siya, kahit na homicide siya, it doesn't involve moral turpitude dahil napatay lang daw naman niya yung biktima out of self-defense. So, wala daw moral depravity. Wala daw moral depravity in that case. Pero tatanungin mo kasi actually, kung if it was done in self-defense, dapat hindi siya na-convict of homicide dahil it's an extenuating circumstance. Self-defense, it's an exempting circumstance. So nakakapagtaka na convict siya, ibig sabihin hindi naniwala yung trial court na may self-defense. Pero at the same time, the court look into those circumstances. Siguro hindi lang maganda yung pagkakapruweba ng element of self-defense sa trial court, but the Supreme Court regarded it as a circumstance showing na wala namang moral depravity itong taong to. Whereas, kung yung homicide was intentional, I would imagine that the Supreme Court will say na ito involves moral depravity and therefore
yung attorney, yung homicide through reckless imprudence. Diba? Yung aksidente.
Aksidente lang. So walang moral depravity. Pwedeng makalusot yung mga through negligence kasi walang intent.
Intentional maliciousness, parang ganun yung moral depravity. Talagang malisyoso kang tao, loko-loko ka, may gusto kang lolokohin.
Kung nag-fraud ka, you intended to
malisyoso ka.
Fraud.
Yon. Okay. Now it's clear to us what's going on here.
So titignan natin kung merong ill intent or malicious intent or moral depravity or element of fraud doon sa kaso ng hindi pagka-file ng income tax return. So it's on a case-to-case basis, and we don't want to preempt the COMELEC and the Supreme Court in making the decision.
Factors na titignan dito.
Yes.
Who decides dito sa cancellation and disqualification cases?
Parehong COMELEC yan, Mark.
Parehong COMELEC.
It was filed with the COMELEC. Pagkatapos magdesisyon ng COMELEC, pwede pang mag-motion for reconsideration. It will be decided by the COMELEC en banc. And then, pag decide na yung COMELEC en banc, pwede pa itong i-apela sa Supreme Court. So, maaring dumating pa itong kasong to sa Supreme Court.
So,
at maaring tatagal ito until next year, well into next year, right? If that's the case.
Pwedeng mangyari yan. Ordinarily, dapat matapos yung kaso bago ma-print yung ballot para magkaroon na ng kasiguruhan kung masasama ba yung pangalan nung kandidato na yan sa balota. But like in the case of in the disqualification case that I handled, na-print na yung balota, hindi pa na-desisyonan yung kaso. So it should be given priority, pero sometimes hindi talaga umaabot.
Kailan mo yung balota i-print? Sorry.